today what we're going to do is I'm going to show you, I'm going to attempt to show you anyways, how to install the Borla exhaust, I have the ATAK version, on a 2014 Jeep Grand Cherokee SRT. Now, normally I might do this at a place where there's a lift. I have access to a couple of different garages with lifts, but I think the vast majority of individuals may want to attempt this at home. I know me personally, when I first got the exhaust the other night, I thought, yeah, I'm going to go out and try it right now and put it on the driveway. And thankfully my wife talked me out of that, because it probably wasn't the best idea because it was dark and I didn't have a lot of the stuff that I needed, and which we'll go over the things you may or may not want to purchase. First off, there's the Jeep. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay out all the different tools that you may want to use in this install. And like I said, I'm doing it in my driveway without lifts, without jack stands, and without any drive-on ramps. And I'm doing that because depending on your size, you may not need those. If you have a decent driveway and you're not very big, you may actually be able just to lay into the Jeep yourself and install the exhaust. And I'm going to try that. I haven't tried it yet. I got under there. I fit. So we're going to see if just me laying under the Jeep will work, or if it's better for ramps. I found in the past when doing exhaust like this that if you use ramps and you're too far away, you find yourself actually having to reach up and grab at the exhaust. And what you end up doing is you end up having to crunch up, and it's not comfortable at all. This works out pretty well because of the higher ride height on the Jeep. So I've had a few Corvettes and you could not crawl under them per se to do the exhaust. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay out the different things that I'm going to use to do the exhaust install, and we'll see how it goes. I'll do my best to capture some of the more important parts while I'm underneath the truck. And then what we'll do is I'll go through some challenges maybe that I learned at the end that might help you make this install a little easier. With that being said, let's go ahead and pull out some of the items we'll be using. I'll lay them out here. We'll go through them one by one. I'll give you a quick description. I do recommend reading the instructions. They're very short. It's a pretty simple install. I've read a lot on the internet of where people are doing this in less than an hour. I'm going to take a little longer, probably because A, I'm not too mechanically inclined, and B, I'm going to be fumbling around with cameras and all kinds of things, and it's going to take longer. My wife may even get in the way. So now that we have our tools, for the most part, laid out, I'll read through exactly what you're required to have, and you see how I differed a little bit. Spray lubricant, which I did pick up some spray lubricant. I grabbed liquid wrench, white lithium, 15mm deep well socket, and a 3/8 drive ratchet and a 3-inch extension for the 3/8 drive ratchet. It says to have a pry bar. I don't have a pry bar really that I can remember, so we won't use a pry bar. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to take the liquid wrench, you're going to get under the truck, and you're going to basically spray the hangers. This truck has 100 miles on it. I'm not sure they're going to really be on there, but if you get into one of the older, an older truck, one of the older SRTs, or even if you're doing some work on a WK1, those hangers are going to have, dried out a little bit over time. They're going to be gripping the exhaust, the metal in the exhaust hangers a lot harder. The pry bar is to get those hangers off, so I may find myself down here with a big screwdriver pretty soon. So we'll see. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and spray. Okay, so we've got our spray lubricant on. One thing I would note, if you're going to use the spray lubricant, get yourself a pair of decent safety glasses, only because it's pretty tight under there, and if you're spraying anything that's going to be moving around, or even dirt falling down from the Jeep, it can end up in your eyes. And so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to measure 3 inches per Borla's instructions, and that's 3 inches back away from the seam of the weld on the exhaust. The first seam you come to. I think it's the first seam, if you count the one at the can, but right. So you measure 3 inches back, and then what we're going to use is one of these. Some of you may have seen these before, some of you may not. So this actually is an exhaust cutter. It's got a bunch of different names. But what's great is you can buy this from AutoZone for 50 bucks and then return it within 90 days, and you don't actually have to pay for it. It's a part of their tool loan program or something. So what you do is you wrap this around the exhaust, you tighten it down, and then you slowly turn it. And these small wheels will start to cut the exhaust in a very clean line, and it gives you a nice break so you don't have to deal with jagged edges and whatnot on your hands. And should you go to put the exhaust back together and you go back to stock, it makes it a little easier to put a coupler in there to hold those two pieces together. It also keeps you from getting a sawzall through the floorboard, which I've seen guys in Corvettes do, but the floorboard of the Corvette is made of wood, so go figure. So to do that, I have my measuring tape. I actually have a gold pen because my permanent markers are nowhere to be found. So I got the wife's crafty Sharpie gold marker. So I'm going to measure and I'm going to cut. And I actually have a pair of gloves here that I bought that I'm going to use as well because I have very soft hands and I don't want to ruin what I've worked so hard to gain. This is the point in the video where I would have liked to have showed you the exhaust and how to take it off. But what happened is I ran into some issues both with the camera and with the exhaust removal itself, and I'll explain those later. So without further ado, here is the exhaust fully installed. Okay, welcome back. So the exhaust is on the truck. There were a few issues. As you can see, I'm wearing different clothes because it's clearly not the same day. I got started a little later than what I wanted to and ran into some issues that you will probably run into should you try this in your driveway, and that was one of the reasons I really wanted to take this on kind of bare bones DIY, was to really see what issues there might be for those who decide to do this down the road. One of the first things I would recommend is don't do this in your driveway. If by any means you can try to get to where you can get a lift, that's great. If you can get some drive-on ramps, that's probably the middle option. At the very least, you may want to jack the truck up, and I'll tell you why. And this really only applies to those guys, particularly those using the tool that I mentioned, the exhaust cutting tool. So what I found out was when I first started cutting on the passenger side, the clearance between the cutting tool itself and the driveway wasn't enough for me to go a full 180 or to 200 and something degrees back and forth around. And so I was limited to about this far I could go between the transfer case and the tool hitting the ground. And so my first cut, actually, what ended up happening was I ended up cutting 3/4 of the exhaust. And so then I had to go back, and it took a long time because what happens is that tool then starts to bind. The cutting wheels themselves will actually go into the cut that you've made, and the chain itself starts to bind on the one side, and it doesn't allow you to put enough pressure on the other side to get enough force for those wheels to cut. And it gets a little complicated, and I'm sure this wouldn't have happened had I had it up just a little higher to where I could actually get the full clearance to go, you know, 180 to about 220 degrees all the way around in full rotation from body panel to body panel on the tool. So that's the first thing. You know, if you can get it up a little higher, I still recommend the tool. I wouldn't recommend it just laying flat on the ground, because you probably will hit your driveway and you'll end up in the same situation I did. So once you get the exhaust cut, it's pretty easy. I mean, that's really one of the bigger challenges. What I would recommend before even starting cutting is remove the flashing from beneath where the spare tire sets. There are 2 small clips in the back, and I believe 6 or 7 along the bumper. And removing this gives you a ton of headroom underneath, because there's basically nothing between that, and you have about 6 to 8 inches of clearance that you gain, and so you have a little more freedom to move around underneath the Jeep, especially if you're going to do it flat in the driveway like I did. That was a real big benefit, and I didn't do it until after I'd gotten both exhausts cut, until I was working on actually trying to get the exhaust loose, did I realize, well, I could take this flashing off and I would have a lot more room. So don't make that mistake I made. So getting back, so the exhaust is cut, you've got the flashing off. Now the next thing you're going to want to do is take the clips off. Now these have been sprayed, presumably, if you followed my directions earlier, you've sprayed these with some lithium grease. They're exhaust hangers. I mean, everyone's got the tricks and the trades. You know, I had a piece of wood, I had a screwdriver that I actually got between the actual hanger and the exhaust, and I was able that gave it enough clearance for it to come out. It really is a combination of leverage and trickery and a little bit of manliness. I have to admit, the last hanger, the rear, there are 2 hangers on the exhaust, I should say. There's one it's clearly visible, and the other one looks like you would need to take the rear quarter panel off, or the wheel well covering. Don't do that. It's really simple to get off, and here's the kind of tip, and I think many guys have mentioned this in the forums, and I remember reading it as well. Once you get the exhaust cut, and once you can free that first large black exhaust hanger, you know, take it loose and turn it up, spin it up out of the way. Basically, set the exhaust down and turn it kind of towards the wheel well, and that'll give you access to the orange exhaust hanger that's kind of up behind the exhaust, between the exhaust and the rear quarter panel. That hanger is not nearly as of the same grade of rubber as the black one, and so it's a little more flexible. On one side, I actually just pulled kind of towards me a little bit, and it popped out. Just caution on the passenger side, there is a ground that's attached to the exhaust, so don't rip it out too hard, or you'll pull that ground wire off the exhaust can. It's attached to a part of the exhaust can. So once you get the exhaust out, I mean, putting the new ones in is really a piece of cake. You know, I basically hung up the rear exhaust hanger first, the orange one, slid the exhaust into very loosely. You basically slide the Borla over the piece you cut. At that point, you've already got your hanger on. Follow the directions. I believe it's 35 pounds. You want to tighten that clamp down to, and then flip your black exhaust hanger down and push it back on, and that's really it. I mean, the exhaust came out great. The sound, I'm used to having exhaust systems that are headers 3 inches back on the LS GM engines, and I'm really used to a lot louder sounds. I think it's a combination of how quiet the cabin is in the Jeep, the sound insulation, deadening materials, along with it's just the axle back. And so if you were to go with a catback system, something like Corsa's catback, or Cook's, I believe has a catback system. I know they have a full exhaust. American Racing, I mean, some of these other companies offer some catbacks that they're going to give you a little more sound because they're going to open up the exhaust a little further back. But one of the things that I've come across anyways is once you go into the full headers and whatnot, you really need to get into the tuning to really take advantage of some of those performance gains, and I'm not quite sure that the tuning is there yet for the 14s. So that's why I've decided not to. I just went with the Borla axle back for now, and I'll eventually go with the full setup with I'll probably go with Cooks or Corsa or American Racing. I believe they all make systems that can connect to this. Any good muffler shop can help you get the system installed and make sure the two join in some fashion. had an issue with my CTSV where I was mixing a Cook system and I believe a B&B system, and exhaust guys figured it out in like 20 minutes, so it's not a big issue. Really happy with the system. I got to thank Maryland Speed. I emailed the guys, I believe, on like a Tuesday night at 10:30. They answered back, yes, it's in stock, and I believe it was in less than 2 days they had the system shipped to me. Great service. I can't say enough about how quick it got here. The packaging was great. Got a free hat, which you saw earlier in the video. Overall, it's a good system. I haven't heard any of the other 14s, or I haven't heard any other of the SRTs, actually, the Jeeps, with aftermarket systems. I don't really know how to compare it. On the road, it's pretty quiet unless you really get into it. It does encourage you to play with the paddles a little more. I find myself going through parking lots, purposely downshifting, probably further than I should, just to hear the exhaust. The rev matches are a little more aggressive. You get a little more pop on the high acceleration rev matches. Overall, it's a great system. It really wakes this thing up, because I have to admit, I was a little. It was quiet. It's a quiet. As you can see from the video earlier, the before and afters. It's a quiet system. I mean, it's a quiet Jeep, and I really think that this system is kind of what most people should look for. It's not as aggressive as you would think, and even I think because it's supposed to be louder than the Borla S is the entry level. Cut. Try this again. Now the ATAK system is the more aggressive of the two systems offered by Borla, but at the end of the day, I wouldn't really call this system aggressive. If the Borla S is quieter than this, I would find it hard to believe that you would want something quieter than this. Now, if you are going to go the route of headers and a full exhaust down the road, this may get a lot louder, a lot faster than, say, a Borla S type might. So that may be some considerations if you're going to buy an axle back and you're looking at Borla and you want to go loud, but you'd want to go headers maybe 6 months to a year from now. That may be something to consider, as those headers are going to open up this exhaust quite a bit. And so this doesn't sound too loud now. I may change my tune, or my wife may change my tune for me when I add a set of headers onto this, and just the comparison of how loud that's going to be in the combination of the ATAK and the headers. And so, but that's it. It was a pretty easy install. I screwed up quite a bit, trying to do it in my driveway, not being able to cut the pipe, but getting the cans off, the exhaust hangers, all of that was really a piece of cake, and the system went on really easy. It's a lot lighter than the stock system. I forget the total weight of the system. I think it's 26 pounds or something. But yeah, I'm happy with it. It's great. I recommend it being the first upgrade you can do for the Jeep, for new Jeep owners, for guys out buying the SRT. It's definitely a must-do upgrade. It's on highway speed. I had little drone. MDS is not affected by this. It's just overall, it's really the way this Jeep should sound. It's just got a nice, nasty bite at wide open, but under just normal throttle applications, it's just a mediocre kind of. It sounds Hemi without screaming SRT, and I think that's kind of where a lot of guys want to be. A little disappointed in how quiet this thing was, because I know SRT can make things sound great. The Abarth is a perfect example of the SRT guys working to tune an exhaust perfectly. But this, I think the buyer for this really does want a little more sound than what the brand offered from the factory, and an aftermarket exhaust is really what this thing needs more than anything else. So again, thanks for watching. If you have any questions, shoot me an email. My email address is in the comments below, and have a great day. Enjoy your Jeep.